The matriarch of House Core was running late for a dinner. Well, that was an underwhelming first sentence, which sort of foreshadows all my other thoughts about this book. That's right, we're talking about The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. The book takes place in a fantasy setting of our own world, late 19th century France, and it is a heist story where a band of misfits gets together to obtain an object. Kirkus Reviews said Lee Bardugo's Six of Crows and Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code converge in this dazzling new fantasy. The mystery in this book definitely feels a lot like the Da Vinci Code. The puzzles they solve feel pretty forced. They're kind of overly simplistic at times. They're not very interesting. I don't have a physical copy, but I'm going to show you one of the puzzles in this. There are 4 parts here. Obviously this forms a horse eye if you know what a horse eye looks like. But even if you don't know what a horse eye looks like, you still know that this is an eye. Then one character puts these together and the other character's like, wow, how did you know how to do that? And I'm like, come on, this is like the easiest thing ever. It's just like, what? It's not even a puzzle. What is this? And for some reason, all security systems in this book are puzzles. Why is everyone making all these puzzles for people to solve when they should just use a cipher so that no one can open it without the cipher? The magic system in this book is called forging, which means literally anything, really. Whenever there's something weird going on and you're like, what the hell is this? And it's like, oh, it's forged. I think there are types of forging, but as far as I can say, there is no limit to any type of forging, and it can just appear. A doorknob can be forged and it can just act like a fingerprint reader or whatever. It can be literally anything, and often it's the explanation for everything weird that happens in the book. You're like, how did this happen? It was like, it's forged. I am not a huge fan of broad magic systems where anything can happen in a magic system that I cannot guess at all, because then it can be used to sort of patch up the holes in the plot, and it happens a lot in this book. It is obviously hard not to compare it to Six of Crows, and this book also has that sort of bantering dialogue, but the problem with the dialogue in this book is just everyone is sarcastic 100% of the time. So there are not a lot of moments where you can just be with these characters in a scene where they are like actually themselves, actually truthfully speaking to each other. There's always this need to be sarcastic all the time for these characters. Like whenever there's something remotely truthful is about to happen, someone just has to make a joke about it to just undermine that dramatic moment. So I felt I was never really able to spend one genuine moment with any of these characters. Now the book was built on very interesting ideas, and these characters are quite diverse. There's one character who is neuroatypical. There's a character who is part Filipino, part Hispanic in the 19th century. So that's a very interesting heritage to have at that time period. And on paper, they all have these interesting backgrounds, but that pretty much stays there. And the reason I think is because their background doesn't necessarily affect anything in the main story in a significant way. And all characters have their viewpoint chapters, so you do get to spend time in their own minds, and you do kind of see the struggles of the neuroatypical character, for example, dealing with social situations. However, it doesn't seem to be affecting her experience in the world. And this character with Hispanic Filipino identity is the type of period no one really explores in books like that, and that's a super interesting character idea, but really nothing comes out of it except for that one scene where we said he doesn't really fit in either society. The resistance doesn't really want to accept him as a member because of his heritage. And that is such a small thing in the book, and we don't even hear about that resistance after that, I think. And it just doesn't really affect his experience in this world at all. I think that's a missed opportunity. The ideas that this book was based upon are very strong, and I think this book could have been something incredibly fantastic, but the problem is ideas don't make stories. Unfortunately, I am really struggling to say anything positive about this book apart from the ideas it's based upon. I found the characters very one-dimensional, just limited to their gimmick. The love story just felt off. I guess one reason is because no one really speaks genuinely to each other, so like we can't really understand what these characters feel about each other. There's always a joke in the end. So the weird thing about the love story portion of this book is there's a girl named Layla, and she calls the guy Majnun. So I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with the story of Layla and Majnun, but to me, it sounds like a girl named Juliet calling a guy Romeo, which means if they're not together, it's just weird, and if they are together, it's just cringy. And throughout this book, this girl named Layla keeps calling this guy Majnun, and they have this on and off type of relationship. And each time, it's either weird or cringy to me. I am curious about what you felt about it. Did anyone know about the story of Layla and Majnun when they read this book? Now, there was one character I kind of liked, and that character was, I'm guessing, could be very unexpected, but it was Hypnos. Hypnos is such an interesting character because he is so pretentious in the most insecure way. I thought that sarcastic, always joking type of dialogue only worked for Hypnos, and I thought it worked really well for him. And I think there was so much to explore about him because Hypnos is a character who used to have a friend that he hung out with, and they're both heirs to major houses in France. However, at some point, his friend's inheritance is taken away, so he ends up becoming the leader of his own house, but his friend loses everything. And in the process, they grow apart. But he clearly still misses his friend, and he is just so lonely. He is just trying to make connection. And I really thought that was such a fascinating character. I really enjoyed reading Hypnos. And he possibly came up with this strange name Hypnos for himself, and I think he calls his house Erebus or something. He's just so pretentious in the most fun way. I was really excited to see that he had one chapter as his viewpoint, but that chapter was completely wasted, unfortunately. That's pretty much the only positive thing I can say about this book. It really didn't work for me. As far as the rating goes, I'm just gonna say sure. I guess it has a decent idea, and I see all these important issues the book cares about. However, the problem is the issues cannot stand on their own. The issues need to have a direct impact on the immediate story. It just cannot be just world building. And this overly confusing magic system, I can pretty much follow any type of complex world building. I really don't have a problem with that. But in this book, it was just so confusing. There's no limit to it, there's no weakness to it. And it seemed like the plot would jump from point to point all the time. I found it really hard to follow at times. And obviously the most important thing is just it was really difficult to invest in these characters when they're not really speaking genuinely. It's just all sarcasm and all jokes, all bantering. But I know that a decent number of people likes this book a lot. And if you're one of those people, I want to know what you loved about this book. I even saw someone said they loved the characters, so I guess to each to their own. But to me, unfortunately, this book was a difficult read and I just cannot recommend it. I was just gonna go ahead and give it a 1 star, but I couldn't because I really believed in the ideas the book was based upon. However, I was just not able to execute it. But other than that, that's all I have to say, and see you next time.